Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor, Keith Raynor. Keith, I have some huge news to share with you.
Ooh, huge news. Y'all, I have no idea what this is. This is legitimately an organic reaction, whatever's about to happen.
This I didn't tell you about it beforehand, but it's this. We have to change the name of the podcast because Keith,
we've been purchased by ABC. Ultiworld's been purchased by ABC.
That's not
We're
it.
now part of the Disney Corporation.
My team.
We're in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You just talked over me. My team won Summer League. I need some hype on that.
Oh my gosh! Wait, so everybody on the podcast is a Summer League champion.
This is what we're now. It's not Deep Look anymore. It's just called Summer League Champs.
Summer League Champs look like Summer League Champs apostrophe look. we're only Summer League Champs are looking here.
This is my second championship, Summer League championship in New York. I got one in Albuquerque, and it just feels so good, Keith. It really does. Celebration afterwards at the bar. You just love to see it.
I unfortunately had to miss my team's post championship antics, of which there were 2 occasions for baby stuff, but it was still a great win. It was nice. We actually had fans for the other team were there. They had like a lot of sideline presence for a Summer League final. I think it was like people's parents and stuff, but yeah. So it's fun to beat the home fans.
My brother is in town right now, and he was there watching. So we had like 2 fans, Thomas and his girlfriend.
Has he watched you play before?
Sure. I mean, we played together in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he's watched me play much since then. Maybe not. But yeah, it was crazy. We played semifinals back to back and got a big lead in the final in the first half and then just could not stop turning it over. I mean, it literally came down to us running out the clock up 1 late. So kind of, I don't want to say it was a miracle that we won. Like, we definitely outplayed the team overall, but we almost gave it away. We just could not stop turning it over. It was crazy.
That is not entirely dissimilar from my experience. We were up huge, and then we let them make a run, but it never got that. Like, I don't think they ever got within 3, but we were up like 7, and then we had a bunch of short field turnovers.
Yeah,
but
all right. Well, let's stop talking about this because we got a lot to get to today.
Yeah, there's a lot of good Ultimate to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about. I mean, we had a huge weekend of Club Ultimate. Like, everybody's trying to get a tournament in before the series. So, like, everybody plays.
Which is soon. The series is very soon.
The series is in, like, 2 weeks. Sectionals starts in 2 weeks. So, some big picture updates. It's starting to sound like the Canadian teams are just not going to come play. Which sucks because, I was really hoping we would see Sixers, and there was a lot of optimism, I think, early, a month ago, maybe even 2 months ago, that the Canadian teams were going to come. They were saying they were going to come. They were planning to come, but the border is still closed on the driving side. So you got to fly, and then you got to rent cars, and they're so expensive right now. Anybody who's trying to rent cars knows how brutal it is. And I think they just decided it's too much, too expensive, not worth it. And then like dealing with all the COVID stuff and then having to fly back for nationals. I understand it, but it does mean that we're going to get, particularly in the Northeast and Northwest, different looking regionals. And it's not confirmed that no one's playing, but I've heard that Sixers is out. I've heard that Goat is out. I've heard that Iris is out. We already knew that Halifax Salty was out. So a lot of the really talented women's teams from the eastern side of Canada are not going to be playing at regionals. And that's despite the fact that women's teams in Canada were offered buys straight to regionals. They didn't have to come play sectionals. But ultimately, it's looking like it's going to be just a little too many hurdles and too much money. So too bad to hear. But the Ultimate Canada Invitational will be fun. Check out our sister podcast, Huck and A, if you're interested in keeping up with what's going on in Canada. And let's get to what happened this weekend, Keith. We had 4 pretty big tournaments. The Elite Select Challenge, which, of course, on the Triple Crown Tour. We had Smut, a mixed tournament up in the Northwest with pretty much all the good Northwest mixed teams. AMP Invite, which was all the good mixed teams from the East Coast. And then the Eugene Reopen, which was Schwa, Riot, Fury, and other Pacific Northwest women's teams playing in an unsanctioned tournament to kind of get their season started. So, a lot to get to. I mean, I don't think there's so many games and things to look at here. I don't think we can really go team by team, but let's hit some of the high notes here. At the AMP Invite, Space Heater goes undefeated. And I mean, we knew they were going to be good, but Keith, I think that they're really showing us right now that they may be the team to beat this year in the mixed division.
Are you shocked? Like
no.
This roster came out and it was like, oh no. I think that I've been on record that I think this regular season may tell us less about the postseason than any year ever has. But hot damn. Like, I think this is it would be a shock to me if this team is not in semifinals come nationals, like a true shock. So no surprise to see them go out there and be as successful as they've been earlier on in the year. They're number 2 in our power rankings, but they were behind AMP. So, what maybe does this say more about AMP? Maybe.
I mean, AMP looked okay. They only went 2-3. They lost by 1 to Sprocket. They lost by 1 to Dragon. They lost by 5 to Space Heater. So, I mean, are you surprised? I mean, they've lost some real talent. Anna Thompson is gone. Nikki Spiva is gone. I mean, you look in the long term, Michael Ng is gone. Like, they're still really good. I think they're still for sure a semis contender, but they are not the team they once were. They're just not. Sean Mott is gone. Like, I don't think that this team is gonna be a killer.
I think we're gonna see how big of a loss Anna Thompson is.
Yeah.
You really can't overstate the size of the hole that leaves, and even bringing in talented players like Lindsay McKenna, it's just like that's a good replacement. But Anna Thompson could be the best woman in the mixed division, if she were still in it. So,
well, and I think she's, she just goes out there for Fury, and with a tiny roster, Fury crushes everybody.
I was just gonna say we're gonna talk about what she's up to these days.
Yeah, playing for Fury. So, Dragon Thrust goes 3-2. They lose to Space Heater and kind of a weird 5-point loss to Toro. They're solid again. I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of like balance below those top couple teams. Toro goes 3-2, loses to Space Heater and AMP pretty soundly. Let's see, what did Sprocket do after that opening win? They ended up just going 2-1. They only played 3 games. They beat Shine and AMP. They lost to Toro. So, inconsistent and maybe not a surprise, a young roster.
No, to me, they're pretty properly assessed as, 8 to 12 quarters level team that has some potential for high highs, but also could bottom out, given that they're a brand new squad. And Dragon Thrust, I still feel good about them. I think they're going to bring it together with a little bit of time, but they lost some key veterans, and I think that can make a big difference for them. Obviously losing Bacon is a big deal, but they lose Austin Leon, Blake Trantina, Strings, some really experienced players. Also sad to see Leo Sovel Fernandez gone. I was really getting attached to the idea of him coming up with that team. Becca Ludford, another loss for them. So they lost some key players, but they've got enough talent, I think, to still be a semis team.
Quick correction, by the way. I said Nikki Spiva's gone from AMP. That's not true. He's playing with AMP. I'm mixing up my departures and arrivals.
Do they have Sean Mott?
No, they do not have Sean Mott.
That's who you're thinking of, I think.
Yeah. And again, like AMP's good. They're all good. I think Space Heater though is clearly a cut above.
Agreed. Although I'm still high on one of these teams out west that was playing this weekend, Seattle Mixtape.
Yeah, they looked very good. They looked very good. They go undefeated. They go 7-0, and they really didn't play a lot of close games. I mean, they kind of dominated everybody. The closest game was in the final against BFG. They win 15-12, and yeah, it's hard not to be impressed by this team. You know, they get some players back from past years. You know, Bert Cherry on the roster again. They're already like have a lot of continuity, and you know, they add Billy Katz from Sockeye. I think that this team is for sure. I mean, a lot of these Seattle mixed teams are looking really good. We're going to talk about another one in a second. It's just popping up, and I mean, for sure, I think if you have to pick right now, you almost certainly take Mixtape Space Heater in the final. I just think that like is pretty clearly the best two teams right now. And I actually think that, you know, mixed is, we often talk about mixed as being like, oh, there's so much parity, you know, it's so crazy, but I don't actually expect it to be that crazy this year. I think we have two really clearly superior rosters. Which is,
you know, there's been a little bit of that with, you know, Mixtape's been at the top of the heap for a while. So I hope we get the clash. I hope we get to build some narrative around it. And then I hope we get that showdown. Two teams have some history, plenty of star power. Gina Titcomb, I think, is playing with Mixtape now.
That's right.
Just to keep adding. So I'm very excited. I think mixed like semis and championship should be. I mean, it was awesome in 2019, and I think we could get a lot of the same come the 2020 version.
Yeah.
2021.
Anything
version,
else from the Smut tournament stand out to you? I mean, BFG only loses the one game. And it kind of looked like everybody else was very much a step behind. Like the semis were Mixtape 15-8 over the Administrators and BFG 15-7 over Birdfruit. So I think you see there's like some separation there at the top.
And no surprise. I mean, maybe there's another Northwest team that's, you know, now maybe there's another Northwest team that's good enough. You know, if you talk about your Locksaw, I believe is how we decided we're supposed to say that.
That's correct.
Your Moondogs. But I think that Seattle teams, these BFG and Mixtape, I should say, I guess there's other Seattle teams. BFG and Mixtape are definitely a cut above. It's in a similar way that if we feel like Space Heater and Mixtape are in a tier of their own, I kind of feel the same way in the microcosm of the Northwest with Mixtape and BFG.
Well, let's talk about a new team that has been rumored and is now exists in the USAU Score Reporter with a roster.
A challenger enters.
Yes, sorta is the name because maybe they're sorta playing. They're sorta doing the club thing. But this is a very nice looking roster. They've got a lot of the names that you didn't see pop up on rosters in Seattle that you're like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. This is what they're doing. So Alyssa Weatherford, Bailey Zahnizer, Paige Soper, Hannah Kreilkamp, Chris Kasednar, Danny Karlinski, Sam Harkness, Frank Barrich. They're all playing on a mixed team called Sorta. I don't know if they're going to play a single game before the series. But, I mean, I guess the big question is, Keith, does this team beat Mixtape or BFG? And in a bigger picture sense, does this team make quarters at nationals?
No, I don't. I can't favor them against BFG or Mixtape, who are basically like similarly talented rosters with a lot more experience. But
Zane Rankin,
I don't see why this team can't compete on a national level. I'll be curious, like what the attendance is, how these things come together. But these kind of thrown together teams with this level of experience, and you know, these are competitors. Once they're in a position to win, they're not going to be taking it easy. You know what I mean? So you know, this is a deep team with some real top end talent. I see no reason to think that they can't compete for a quarter spot at nationals. Like thinking about like looking at the power rankings, you know, where do you slot them in? We've Mischief at 10 with the update pending. Probably be out by the time this podcast is out.
I think this team is worse than Mischief.
So you put them in like that. You know, do you think they're better than Luxa or Kansas City United, Public Enemy?
Yes,
those are the teams that are behind Mischief.
Not Public Enemy. Public Enemy is better than that.
Okay. So this is like a 12, 13, 14 area power rankings team, which means they're competing for quarters. They're making pre-quarters. And in a heads up, why not?
I mean, it's definitely got a little bit of a Masters vibe to it, like especially in the men's side of things. Like they got a lot of guys who are, were really good 5 years ago. I mean, they're still going to be good. Like Zane Rankin's on this team, Miles Snyder's on this team. Shout out to my NYU people on this team. I think it's hard to just show up and win though, without a lot of practice. And I have no idea what they're doing in terms of practice, but a new challenger appears.
Should be interesting. The Northwest has a little thrill to it.
How about the Great Lakes mixed division though?
Yeah.
I mean, let's go talk about it because a lot of them were playing at Elite Select Challenge. Hybrid beats Cleveland Crocs 12-6 in the final. But we're talking about a Great Lakes mixed region that has one bid, and there's like 5 or 6 teams that feel like they could take the bid. Hybrid's got to be your favorite, right? Especially
Agreed,
after this weekend.
But but not by a lot. I mean, wait, I don't know. Should cocktails be the history favors cocktails?
That's true. Right? I mean, cocktails lost to Hybrid 12-10 this weekend.
It's pretty close.
Pretty close. They lost to Crocs. Cleveland Crocs, 13-11 beats Cocktails. But, I mean, there's just a lot of good teams. There's a lot of good teams. So, anyway, Hybrid gets the win. It's like a lot of the best of Michigan. We've talked about them earlier this year. Not a ton of close games either. They beat Kansas City United 13-11. That was their closest game. Well, I guess they had a 2-point win over Cocktails as well. Otherwise, pretty comfortable victories, including in the final over Crocs. And I mean, I think this is I think if I had to pick today, I'd pick Hybrid to get out and go to nationals. But it's certainly not a lock. There's just too many good teams.
Right. It's extra dangerous because they could lose. They could end up playing really good teams in semifinals.
Yes, I'm sure they will.
Chicago U54 is going to be lurking around. You know what I mean? Like this is I can't believe that we get so hyped about Great Lakes Ultimate, but Great Lakes Regionals could be the place to be.
Interesting year for sure. Let's look at the women's division, which, we haven't had a ton of women's competition, so it's great to see what's been going on. We'll come back to Elite Select Challenge. Fury, Schwa, Riot were the big headliners out at the Eugene Reopen. Fury, with 14 players, just kind of dominates. Like, I was expecting, because they were playing with a short roster, that Schwa might win this thing. But they kind of dominated Schwa. And Riot is clearly a step behind both of those teams. I mean, this is not the Seattle Riot of 2019 or really the entire 2010s. A lot of players are not playing this year. And, I think they're going to go to nationals, especially since I think, maybe Traffic decides not to go to, if Traffic decides not to go to regionals. I just think, but, in that case, like, I forget if they have 3 or 4 bids. I think it's just 3. Honestly, like, Riot could be on the outside looking in if Traffic goes to regionals. I just think it's that kind of setup. I mean, they'll probably get the 3rd bid. I don't see who could beat them in the 3rd bid spot. But, Schwa and Traffic are clearly better than Riot right now. But Fury is the class of the West Coast. And they, rolled over everybody with half their team.
I'm with you on Seattle. I mean, it's less like Riot and more like disgruntled crowd, angry mob. I don't know, peaceful protest. Team name change. Talk to Ozone about that if you can pull that off. But yeah, Fury is like looking like the favorite. 14 people. Classic Fury though. Everybody on the team's like a national team level player. So yeah, it's like going back to Summer League. It's like when you play a Summer League team and they have nobody there, but all the people missing are their bad players. So it just means that every point
relentless
is all good players. It's relentless. That's Fury. I wonder if we're cruising for another Fury Brute Squad, or are we setting ourselves up for expecting the expected and we somewhere along, like, we
I
get
don't
the
see who beats
disruption
them.
along the way. It's tough to find somebody who you feel really confident about, beating one of these teams. They look like juggernauts
really
this year. Not that that's totally unfamiliar, but I feel like the rest of the division is taking a little step back.
The one team that you could see, because they got the Cardenas sisters now together. But I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that there's enough depth there to beat Fury or Brute, who just looks so good. Rosters are just too good, too powerful.
Losing Sixers is, if you're a fan of underdogs, is a tough loss there. And yeah, I'm with you on the Northwest. Like, is the fourth best team in the Northwest the Oregon YCC women's team, Downpour? Like, they might be the fourth best team in the region. I don't know.
I mean, yikes. Let's go to ESC. And if I just told you to guess who was going to win this tournament, who would you have said?
Guess who was going to win ESC? Well, this is not taking into account the completely insane, totally, you can't look at this thing and figure out who's at the tournament format. It's just a
bizarro
mystery.
World.
It's a maze. I don't know what's going on in here. Look, I know everybody wants to get hype about Bent. I probably would have gone with Nemesis.
The one seed,
if I had to pick. Yeah, the one seed, the team that has a little more consistency, also talented. I think Rivals roster looks like they took a step back. I think Parcha and Bent are a little too new. Grit, maybe not quite as talented enough. I probably would have gone Nemesis.
Rival beats Nemesis 12-11 in semis. And Rival beats Grit in the final 14-8. Grit beating Bent 11-9 in semis. So Grit looking like they're maybe taking a step forward. And I have to say, I'm surprised too, Keith, about Rival. They were the 3 seed coming in, but I didn't really think that they were... I thought they could lose in quarters at this tournament, but not so. They dominated Tabby Rosa 15-6 in quarters and then beat Nemesis and went on to win the whole thing. So, I think we maybe underestimated how good this team is going to be.
Potentially. It is worth noting they did lose one game, and they lost pretty handily to Grit 14-9 in pool play. So, not a spotless record. I'm still a little skeptical of the overall talent level. They have a lot of experience. They have a couple of playmakers. I know that people in the area have always been really high on Irish Draversack, so maybe this is a big breakout year for her. They pick up Laura Garancer. I guess I didn't know that was happening, but I'm willing to bet that they're going to be a good team. Like, I don't think that's a far limb to go out on, but this feels like it's going to be the high water mark for them. I'm not going to lie to you.
You may be right. I think it's hard to know like what rosters looked like this weekend, who was there, who was not. Of course, the big thing everybody was looking at this weekend is what's up with Bent and what's up with Parcha, the new team out of Pittsburgh. I think both teams played solid, if not amazing. Bent, I was expecting maybe to do a little bit better. They did go 6-1, or 5-1, excuse me. So you can give them credit for that, right? They pulled off a big comeback win against Parcha, 13-12. They beat Tabby Rosa, 12-11. That was a crazy pool. Like 3 of the best teams of the tournament end up in a pool together. And, they lose to Grit 11-9. It's not a bad loss per se, but I feel like given the fact that, we're seeing this team pick up some really good pieces like Gina Cartagena, I was expecting a little bit more from them, but a 12-8 win over Nemesis to close out the weekend does look good. And I think that this Bent team looks like they're solidly going to be the number 2 team in the Northeast now with Sixers not going.
Agreed. I don't know if they're like this like challenger for semis that people might have been excited about at the beginning of the year. But I do think they're good.
I think we got to wait and see.
I think so too.
We gotta wait and see.
I'm with you, especially since it feels like there's less semi spots locked up than ever before, right? It feels like there's a little bit of a lotto. after that. And I think that maybe I'm biased as a former coach of Tabby Rosa, but I think that they may turn out to be a nice win, especially the beginning of the weekend, because I think they're a little bit thin. So being able to beat them early on before they maybe get a little gassed is a little more impressive to me. I mean, that's, I think, partially why they beat Parcha.
Does this Tabby team have a chance to win the Southeast?
Over Phoenix?
Oh no, you're right. I sometimes forget that North Carolina's in the region.
How many bids do they have though?
I have to look it up.
Because I got to think they're the second best team. I mean, they picked up some real veterans who,
I think it's 2.
You know, okay. I definitely think they could take the second spot. It's a small roster, but there's some good players
it's
on
2.
this
It's 2.
roster.
Because what's up with Atlanta? You know, a lot of questions still.
Who knows?
We're gonna get Ozone, or we're gonna get, what's 04? I don't know.
Don't.
So yeah. Well, anyway, I think Parcha also, they go 3-3. They lose by 1 to Bent. They lose by 1 to Tabby Rosa. They lose by 2 to Grit, and they beat everybody else. I feel like that's pretty good for their first time out there. I don't know. I didn't really know what to expect from this team. If a couple of points go differently, they have their first game as a team, and they blow a lead against Bent. If they win that game, I think you come away thinking, wow, Parcha is going to be really solid this year. Instead, they lose by 1. Does that color the way that you look at them? Perhaps. I think this team definitely looks like they could make nationals. There's no question about that.
I want to see the nice win. This is the thing that I talk about in college all the time, is you don't want your best result of the season to be
a close loss.
A quote, good loss. Yeah. End quote. You don't want that. And which is where they're at right now. Obviously, it's one tournament. They played 3 good teams. There are 3 really good teams, national levels teams. And all of those were close losses. So that's a good sign, but I want to see the W's. I want to see the green against some of these high quality teams. And I don't know when we're going to get to see them again. The talent's there though. I get the reason for excitement. I think if I had to be, I would still be bullish on this team.
Do you take Grit or Parcha right now today?
Today.
No scandal. There's only one bid for Mid-Atlantic Women's.
Oh, like today is if they played today, or if
let's say regionals
who
was
am I
today,
picking
or
at regionals?
Just pick your regionals pick. Too early pick right now.
Well, I'm saying, do they get another month of seasoning, or?
Yeah. Just assume that they're playing at regionals. In a month.
Oh, it's there. This is a coin flip.
I agree.
I think I take Parcha, but I think Grit's legit. I mean, they have some good players. They added some nice pieces to this team.
Erica Bacon playing for Parcha is a big deal.
Yeah.
She looked amazing at the PUL East tournament.
We've converted you.
And yeah, I think, this is their first time out there. I mean, obviously Grit gets the win, right? Grit wins 10-8 at ESC. So advantage Grit right now. But Parcha's going to keep practicing. They're going to figure out their rotations, who's going to be on the O-line. I think when push comes to shove, there's a little more talent on this team than Grit has on theirs.
Agreed, but I think this is very close. It's going
to be a battle.
Yeah.
Exciting game. All right, we're going to look ahead to the AUDL playoffs, which start this weekend. 2 games coming up in the West and the Central. The Atlantic Division games will be next weekend. And we're bringing in Evan Lepler to talk about it with us, who's been following the AUDL closer than really anybody this whole season, and looking forward to getting his perspective. It's coming up next on Deep Look. Joining us now on Deep Look is the voice of Ultimate All Things AUDL, Evan Lepler. Evan, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Charlie. Thanks for having me. Keith, good to see you as well. Looking forward to talking some Ultimate. Exciting time of year.
It certainly is. The AUDL playoffs are upon us. It's recording this Thursday, so we're 2 days away from 1 day away from the start of the playoffs. We've got the West Division and the Central Division games happening this weekend. And then the Atlantic Division games will be next weekend. We don't know the matchups yet. So looking forward to getting into all of this. First and foremost, Evan, we saw that you are unfortunately positive for COVID-19, breakthrough case. I know you weren't feeling well last weekend, but you tested negative earlier in the week. Now you've tested positive. I mean, how are you doing? Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, Charlie, thanks. It certainly is unfortunate and, disappointing to devastating in a first world devastating term, just because I love calling these games and we'll have to miss them this weekend. Fortunately, though, I feel pretty good right now. I, developed some symptoms Saturday afternoon and missed the double overtime classic. Watch you call it, and do a great job from my hotel room in DC, and got tested Sunday morning, as you said. Tested negative. Honestly, woke up Sunday morning feeling mostly better. My fever had broke, still, a little congested, but I was hoping and, really thought it was just like a 24-hour bug. And, a doctor friend of mine said, if you get tested early in your symptoms, it may come back negative. You should get tested again Tuesday or Wednesday. I went and got tested Tuesday morning and frankly woke up Wednesday morning feeling great. Could not smell. My smell is impaired. And I learned via Google that a symptom of a sinus infection also can be a loss of smell. And I've had sinus infections before and frankly thought I had a sinus infection and was like, okay, that may be why I can't smell. But then the test came back positive Wednesday night. And now it's just, all the tracing and letting people know and feeling mortified that you may have gotten someone else sick or exposed somebody else. So yeah, it's been a tough last, 12, 14 hours since learning the news, both from a logistic professional standpoint, figuring out how are we going to make these broadcasts happen, and for everyone who's going to be out there watching, they'll be great. But me personally, I've given my life to the AUDL over the last 12 weeks and have loved doing it and have seen so many great games, and these are the games of the year that you want to be a part of. But I will be a spectator from probably my basement on Saturday night and Sunday evening. So it's unfortunate, but I'm clinging to the hope that I'll be able to be back for the Atlantic Division games the following weekend. From what my doctor friends have told me, 10 days from the onset of symptoms, if I'm not still symptomatic and feverish, I should be fine. Of course, you said it's a breakthrough case. I was vaccinated, got my second dose in April. So hopeful that my kind of 10 days will pass, and then middle of next week, I'll be good to go. The scariest part now is the family considerations of, I have two small daughters and a wife, and her parents are actually staying with us right now. So
Of
trying
course.
to be helpful around the house. And, when you have two little kids running around, or one running, one crawling, it's a challenge to be AWOL. So trying to be helpful while wearing a mask, but also trying to think of the ramifications of those involved. So yeah, it's a strange time, and hopefully this is a reminder for everyone out there that we are still in the midst of this thing, and try to be as safe as you can. But even if you are safe, you can still get hit. So what can you do?
Certainly, we're wishing you the best in your recovery and hoping to see you in DC. But on the bright side, there's some extra ultimate for you to help keep you busy and give you some distraction while you're probably stuck inside. Now that there's this week 13, is that what we're calling this? With the Atlantic games that have extended the regular season so it coincides with the playoffs. It's a weird thing. We're in still some sort of COVID bubble, but we have this New York Boston game and DC against Tampa still setting up what the rest of the playoff bracket is going to look like. I know I'm excited to see some extra ultimate this weekend with so much on the line.
Yeah, it's a good point, Charlie. I've had my focus primarily on the playoff games, and my hunch is that New York and DC will take care of business, and even if they don't, they'll still be in the playoffs and still be super dangerous next week. But Yeah, I mean, when I'm stuck home, I could be talked into New York, Boston, and DC, Tampa. I mean, there's certainly interesting wrinkles with both of those games, and DC and Tampa had a controversial skirmish or interchange, however you want to put it, a few weeks back. And the interesting thing is for DC, like I, I don't think I don't know if Daryl Stanley agrees with me, and I kind of think he doesn't. But if I were DC, I think I'd rather face Atlanta than Raleigh again. Like they've beaten Raleigh twice, barely. And yeah, they lost to Atlanta fairly comfortably at home. And, you know, I've talked with Daryl a little bit about this. He kind of thinks it's a rock, paper, scissors type thing in the Atlantic. Like he may want to play someone and they may want to play someone else. And it might be a triangle or some sort of weird shaped, angled quadrilateral, whatever, with these four teams. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Again, I'm kind of thinking it's going to be the two favorites winning this weekend, giving us Raleigh, DC again. And, you know, if I'm DC, like I think DC has played New York super tough, but I also think New York is the scariest team just because of their top level talent with Yacht and Osgar and Williams. And then you factor in Babbitt and Lithio and others. So I think New York would be the team that I wanted to avoid. If DC lost to Tampa and New York won, they'd get Atlanta. If DC lost to Tampa, but New York also lost, then they'd get New York. And the smart thing for DC is to probably just, you know, play your top game, keep winning, and assume you can take care of business against whoever's coming to your home digs next weekend.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. We'll talk about those games next week for the Atlantic start of the playoffs. Let's look to this weekend's games. And we've got the West matchup with Dallas going on the road and playing in San Diego. And we've got Minnesota going on the road and playing in Chicago. The lines on the games right now, Dallas San Diego -1.5, and Chicago is -2. So let's look at this game with Saturday night, San Diego playing Dallas, and these two teams 1-1 against each other, but Dallas getting a fairly sound win in Texas by 4 points, 19-15, just a few weeks ago. And it kind of was the catalyst for like the turnaround of their season. I mean, at that point, it was question mark whether Dallas was even going to make the playoffs. And then they get this really strong win against San Diego. They obviously have a lot of playoff history. They know how to win in the playoffs. We've seen them prove it against teams that have been better than them during the regular season in the past. What do you make of this game, Evan? Is this going to be another Dallas coming through in the clutch and getting back to championship weekend?
I think Dallas deserves to be the favorite, regardless of what the line says. I mean, if you remember back, I'm pretty sure that mybookie.ag had San Diego as a favorite against Dallas in the semifinals 2 years ago as well, which I think I wrote in the Tuesday toss, regardless of what those odds makers say, Dallas is the favorite and they deserve to be. I think they deserve to be the favorite again, A, because of their track record. B, they've played better down the stretch of the season. I mean, San Diego has had a really weird 10-2 season. Like they have very rarely looked dominant. And even this past weekend, their offense was super shaky against a San Jose team that they handled earlier this year. So I do think Dallas deserves to be the favorite, but I also think this is just going to be a great game. And look, I think the line should have been Dallas -1.5 because I could absolutely see this being a 1-goal game, and you got to pay that tax if you want to get Dallas. Dallas +1.5, I think that's easy money because I think the Roughnecks are the favorite and they deserve to be, and this gives you a chance, even if San Diego sneaks out a win, which they absolutely could do, to still take Dallas +1.5. But look, both games between these teams were very, very close. To say that Dallas controlled the game in the last time, I think, is a slight overstatement. It was a 1-goal game through 3 quarters. And it took not a fluky run, but a good sequence from Dallas at the end of the third to kind of seize momentum of that game when San Diego had just scored 3 in a row in the middle of that third quarter, before Dallas, I think, closed on like a 9-4 run to win that game by 4. They were down by 1, closed 9-4, won 19-15. So the interesting things about this matchup are the fact that both teams went to championship weekend 2 years ago, obviously, and both have the expectation of being back. Both want to claim this division as theirs, and both have reason to be confident. I mean, Dallas, your Alex Rubin reported that Kyle Henke is going to play. I had been going back and forth with Chris Mazer. I know he's probably going to be there as well. And look, Dallas has made a history of putting their best teams together and figuring it out in these moments. But this is also a better San Diego team than the Growlers had 2 years ago. And they have played, for the most part, their best ultimate in their biggest games against Dallas in late June, a game that they won by 1. And even in the game at Dallas, the first 3 quarters, San Diego played well and looked like the better team for a good portion of that game before the Roughnecks made their late run. So, look, there's a lot of interesting matchups. I'm sure we're going to see some surprise tweaks and wrinkles from both coaches and the leaderships. And I mean, this is frankly the game that I've been most looking forward to all year long. And it sucks that I'll be following it from afar, but at least I'll be able to watch it. And I honestly don't care who wins. I hope it's a great game. I hope it goes to overtime. And typically, if I miss a broadcast, it goes to double overtime. So we'll see what happens.
So before Keith jumps in here, I mean, Kyle Henke playing in this game feels like a pretty big deal. I mean, he was playing even with the injury, like some of the best ultimate on the team. And then I thought he was going to be out for the year. And now he's not only is he not going to just play a championship weekend if they get there, but he's going to play in this first game. Is that the X factor here in this matchup, given the way that he played in that last matchup against San Diego?
It's hard for me to say that it's the X factor, but it's certainly a very important factor. And look, Kyle got hurt. I'm going to forget the date, but whenever he got hurt, he got hurt in his first San Diego game, actually, in San Diego, and sent me a note that he was out like 4 to 6 weeks and then was playing again 2 weeks later. And I'm like, what's the deal? I thought you were out. He said, I got a second opinion, and the doctor said I couldn't hurt it anymore, and got a third opinion just to be sure. And they really did their due diligence to make sure that playing with a cast, he wouldn't injure himself any further. So obviously he was one of the greatest one-handed ultimate players I've ever seen. I mean, it was remarkable how good he was, the way he could contort his body in the air to still make athletic plays while protecting himself and not, use the club as a unfair advantage or dangerous tactic for anybody else. Like, it was really phenomenal and impressive what he did. And then when he went back to the doctor and it wasn't healing, he basically knew he was going to have surgery. I talked to him after that, and basically 6 to 8 weeks after that, and right around that time, I think championship weekend was like 6.5 weeks away. So I'm like, is championship weekend a possibility? And honestly, at that time, the Roughnecks were like 4-4 or 5-4. So, you always felt it was a possibility that they could surge with their track record and talent, but it seemed a little bit of an absurd question. Hey, you're 4-4. Can you play in championship weekend? He said he didn't even really want to think about it then. But at the same time, I kind of knew deep down that if they had a chance to bring him back, that they would think about it. So, look, the biggest thing I'm most surprised about is that he's back for the West Division Championship game. I thought if he was going to be back at all, it would be for championship weekend, and we'll see what he can do. I mean, he certainly has been one of the dominant cutters in the league all season long, and there aren't that many guys that can just always create that separation by multiple yards against good defenders. You have to respect him deep, but he's really improved as a decision maker and caretaker of the disc as well over the past few years. He's still just like 23 years old, so he's still a young kid, but he has been a big game player and a big game highlight maker. And I don't know if I'd call him the X factor, but I think he will score several goals on Saturday night and be a thorn in San Diego's side for sure.
I think I'm worried about San Diego's ability to get breaks. I think if this is a clean offensive game with not a lot of breaks, not a lot of turnovers, that's going to benefit them. But if Dallas is able to turn this into a little bit of an uglier game, like they did when they were in Dallas, I think that's going to favor Dallas a lot. And I'm curious how having Chris Mazur in the mix potentially could also impact the game. We know Dallas has a lot of big names, although those names have kind of changed over the past couple of years, including Henke. But I think this matchup has some intrigue. But I'm with you that I think Dallas really has the right to be the favorite here. Just San Diego, both teams have been inconsistent, but I agree with you that Dallas has had a better back end of the year, and that inconsistency has not left San Diego's side. I mean, the Growlers have been kind of a mixed bag, and this will be a real test for them given how the West was this year, a real back and forth environment of sloppy offensive play in a lot of ways. So I think this is going to be a real different style from what San Diego's been playing over the past couple of weeks as far as the competition that they've been going up against. So this will be something where I think Dallas, the ball's in their court. If they can control the style of play, then they're going to be the big favorites. But if they can't, if they let San Diego assert themselves, then they could be playing from behind in a position that they don't want to be.
Is it crazy for me though to say that the Dallas Roughnecks injury problems, obviously getting Henke back is great, but they're still missing a ton of guys, and I don't know that they're necessarily the more talented team. Like when I actually sit down and I think about, okay, what are these O-lines going to look like? I'm not totally sold on Dallas, and I think it's easy to say the Growlers have looked a little shaky lately. That's true, but they've also kind of had home field advantage locked up for weeks. It's hard to maintain focus when you have a bunch of meaningless games at the end of your season, and they won these games. So I still think that this is like a coin flip game for me. I don't necessarily make Dallas the favorite. Evan, curious for what you think.
I think this game is about the mental edge that the Roughnecks have. Because, yes, they have new players and the guys that have come over from Austin like Henke and Cunningham and Mathis and several others. But Kai Marshall and Dalton Smith and Zach Marbach and Ben Lewis and Thomas Slack and Matt Jackson and kind of the rest of the core Roughnecks. Now, the two guys they're missing that I think are the biggest factors are Abe Coffin and Jay Fruit. And I guess it's possible that those guys could play, but I have not heard that they will. And I know they both got hurt. But I still I believe in Dallas's mental edge more than I do in San Diego's. And Keith, I do think San Diego's D-line has players that are capable of moving the disc. I mean, they showed it this past weekend. It was against San Jose, but they got 10 breaks, and Steve Milardovich and Dom Leggio and Michael Tran, all guys who have played a lot of offense in their careers, moved the disc well. I'm more worried about the San Diego O-line and just when they're feeling the pressure. And look, Dallas is a physical team, and they talk and they get in people's heads. And they get in people's heads even before you take the field against them because of their track record and what they've been in this league. I don't care that they don't have Jimmy Mickle or Dylan Freechild or Bo Kittredge or Cassie Rasmussen or Kurt Gibson. They have a lot of guys that play with those guys. And I mean, I didn't even mention Gabe Hernandez, who's been one of their top players the Larberg brothers have the track record. Wes Meow has had a really good year. Connor Olson and Matt Armour has taken a step level up. So, I mean, Kaplan Maurer. I mean, I could, you could run down everybody's name, and we could easily do a 15-minute segment on like each guy on the roster, and we don't have time for that. But I'm all those guys that I mentioned for Dallas, I expect them to expect to win. And even though San Diego can spout all of that, we're confident, we deserve to be confident, we've been here before. Have you? I mean, you won an inferior West Division 2 years ago, and you were competitive with Dallas, but competitive falling short. I mean, this is the same issue I have with the Raleigh Flyers right now. And I think that Raleigh is eminently capable of beating anybody and certainly very talented. But when the push comes to shove, do you believe you're going to win? And is doubt not creeping in the back of your mind? And does San Diego have anybody who's won a championship? Yeah, Lior Gaval won a championship as a secondary player for the Flamethrowers in 2017. Greg Cohen hasn't really suited up all season long after getting injured early for San Diego. So by and large, this is a San Diego team that doesn't have a lot of championship experience. And, that I've talked to Bo Kittredge about this in the past. That belief in those moments of will you come through, that is why I lean toward Dallas in this game. But it's always fun to see somebody break through, and we saw it with the New York Empire a few years ago against Toronto when no one expected that could ever happen, and it finally happened. So the Growlers have the pieces to do it, but I struggle to imagine them being the favorite in this game, even at home.
Let me hit you with some stats real quick before we move to the other game. San Diego and Dallas are amazingly well matched in the statistical side of the game. Points per game, San Diego 20.5. This is goals per game. Dallas 20.25. Points allowed per game, they're dead even at 18.25. When you look at blocks per game, they're within a half block of each other. Turnovers per game, basically equivalent. 18.83 for the Growlers, 18.67 for the Roughnecks. I mean, on paper, this is a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Evan, what you point out is very true. I mean, we've seen this Dallas team have the mentality to win in the playoffs, even in situations where maybe they weren't the best team in the matchup. I mean, I think you could argue that when some of those years they beat Raleigh, they were not as good as Raleigh. And
all three of them,
they came through and got the win. Yeah. I mean, certainly from a win-loss standpoint, they were, traveling on the road and they still get the win. So I think that this San Diego team doesn't feel as good as those Raleigh teams that Dallas beat. My question is, I feel like Dallas's level has dropped a little bit, not only because of the injuries to Fruit and Coffin, but just in general, they've looked a little out of sorts this season. But they seem to show up for the playoffs, so going to be a fun one.
Yeah, the other weird dynamic, Charlie, is that Dallas hasn't played in 3 weeks. They had the last 2 weekends of the regular season off, and this is not a Roughnecks team that practices together much. I'm not sure, to be honest. I because I've been focused on other things the past few days, I haven't reached out to see have they had any practice weekends. My guess is probably not with a full team. So that's really San Diego's chance too. If they can jump on them early, they're not going to beat them early because you can jump on Dallas early like Raleigh did in 2018 and be up by 6 late in the first half and still go home feeling terrible. But if San Diego is going to win this game, they're the team that should be in a slightly more cohesive groove early in the game, especially when you consider Henke returning and Mazer in the lineup again. Like, if San Diego is going to win this game, they got to jump in front early and get the home crowd behind them and just ride that momentum and not let up. Because if you let up against Dallas, it's bad news.
All right, let's turn our attention over to the Sunday evening game between the Chicago Union and the Minnesota Wind Chill. This is a matchup that Chicago has kind of had control of, and Chicago has clearly been the best team in the in the Central Division the entire season. Couple slip ups here and there, mostly when they weren't playing their starters. But this Chicago team, 2-point favorites. I think, Evan, you and I agree they should probably be more like 3.5 to 4-point favorites. I expect Chicago to win this game. How do you see this matchup playing out?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to you, I think more likely than not, Chicago gets through this game and gets to championship weekend. With that said, I probably have more questions about Chicago than I do about San Diego. Just their ability to compete at the highest level, their ability to do it consistently, and their ability to put their pieces together the right way. I mean, the Central Division has not provided them with that many really intense tests. And I think I may have written this word for word, but this game is about who can handle the pressure of this moment. Like, it surprised me when I realized this earlier in the week, Charlie, but Chicago and Minnesota, both franchises that have been in the league since 2013, both franchises that have won a decent number of games, have been pretty solid competitive teams. Neither of these franchises have won a playoff game before. They're a combined 0-7 in the playoffs. And this includes Chicago technically making it to championship weekend back in 2013 as the Windy City Wildfire, when they, I think, finished 14-2 in the regular season. And the 3 seed played the 2 seed, and the 1 seed got a bye to championship weekend of the quote unquote Final Four. So, I mean, these are two franchises that have never been there before. Now, Madison has Peter Graffi and Pat Trilwise, and they've been there before. So that helps. And certainly Chicago has plenty of talent around them. But, as good as Pavlianis is, he hasn't been immune to mistakes and big moments at multiple levels. And Minnesota, like, they might be the team that's almost, innocent and doesn't kind of realize the stakes. I don't know. There is a scenario in my mind where Minnesota could come in, throw the first punch, and catch Chicago off guard in this game. Now, I'm going to pick Chicago to win and probably cover the couple points, but I do think that there's a sneaky chance for Minnesota. I mean, the last time the wind chill went to Chicago, they got the win. And, the Minnesota has impressive guys that you haven't heard too much about. I mean, Andrew Roy has had a really good year, and Will Brandt has had a really good year. Just a 19-year-old kid, hasn't played college ultimate yet. A name to know for the future. Brian Vinoka has been awesome in whatever role the wind chill have put him in. And frankly, that's one of my curiosities heading into this week. Will we see Bevon on O or on D? I think they probably need him on D, but he has been their most valuable player throughout the season. And frankly, they might need him to play both ways a bunch on Sunday in Chicago to have their best chance. In the end, I think it comes down to Chicago's offense. If they play conservative and calm, which they've for the most part been pretty good at doing, they're not going to take that many hucks. They don't need to. And defensively at full strength, with guys like Nate Goff and Von Allen Gilon and Drew Swanson and Tim Schock, ulti-world staffer who, marginalizes as a half-decent AUDL defender. They've got pieces on both sides of the disc to be athletic. But I do think this is going to be a very competitive, fun game on Sunday night. I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
This matchup to me, I hate to say it, but it feels like it comes down a lot to Pavlianis. If you look back at the 3 times these teams played, Chicago goes 2-1. What's the difference with the one loss that they have? Pavel is held to, he ends up with 500 yards, but 282 throwing yards. He ended up going downfield a lot. Just 1 assist. That to me is if Minnesota can figure out a way to push Pavel downfield, to take him out of the offense, to force the offense to run through Nico Lake and, Ross Barker and Keegan North. Those are good players, but Pavel is the engine here. He's the spark. And if the wind chill can find a way to cool him off to push him away from the centerpiece of their offense, they're going to be successful. But the fact that that game came in the middle, that Chicago was able to go back against them, get Pavel back involved. He goes off for 5 assists. The next time that they match up, Chicago wins by 4. But I'm not sure that Minnesota necessarily has the recipe to take Pavel out of the game. And to me, that's probably like priority number 1. Obviously, everybody knows you want to try and stop Pavel, but Minnesota is one of the only teams that's figured out a way to do it, at least briefly. So if they're not able to take Pavel out, I mean, there might not be a more important individual player on any team in the playoffs, in my mind, than Pavel Giannis to Chicago and their championship hopes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Keith.
It sounds like everybody's trying to talk me out of thinking that Chicago is going to win this game comfortably. I don't agree. I think Chicago is going to win this game comfortably. I think when they've put their best lineup out there, they've pretty consistently just dominated every opponent they've played. And I have way more questions about what they might do at championship weekend because of the lack of challenge that they've faced in their division. Minnesota's a good team. I really like what they can do defensively. But Chicago is the lowest turnover rate in the league. They just do not cough up the disc that much. And I think when they're playing at full strength like they're going to be this weekend, that they're, comfortably 3-4 points better than Minnesota. I'm not saying it's impossible that Minnesota wins, but I feel like this game is not nearly as close and interesting as the game out west.
You might be right, Charlie. One point to add, and Keith, I really agree with what you said about Pavel. Like, among all the different stars that they've added, he is the focal point of that team, and just super important to everything they do. And if he has a subpar game, Chicago will have a very difficult time winning comfortably. They can still win, but winning comfortably, Pavel needs to play great. Minnesota struggled in the wind, which, doesn't make sense when you call them the wind chill. But you watch them down the stretch in their home game against Chicago. They looked all out of sorts. And Chicago didn't even look that great in that game either, but still won relatively comfortably. Their follow-up game against Indianapolis, which was a game of the week on a really windy Saturday night, the wind chill. I think Josh Klain had 9 turnovers that night. It was like a 52 turnover game overall between the two teams. If it's windy in Chicago, that's an advantage for the Union. Almost called them the Wildfire. I haven't done that on a broadcast yet this year, unless I did it intentionally. So that's a win. But the Union are better in the wind, offensively and defensively. I mean, they've got bigger athletes downfield to do work defensively. I don't mean to minimize what Minnesota has defensively either, though, because, Charlie, I think you've talked about Colin Berry in the past. His return has been a nice addition. Dylan DeClerc has had an awesome year for the wind chill defensively. Jimmy Kittleson, they call the trash man. He racks up Ds in the deep space on floaters, helping out, poaching. But DeClerc is the guy that gets matchups and gets blocks underneath against really top-level cutters. He's done that throughout his career, and I think he's 3rd in the league in blocks right now overall. So it's funny, as I talk about it, I do see myself giving Minnesota more of a chance. And honestly, Charlie, I thought the line should be 3.5 because there's this perception that Chicago is the superior team. But if it was Minnesota plus 3.5, I might take Minnesota. But 1.5, I think, or 2, it's really close. And I got the opening lines. It opened at 1.5, may have moved to 2. I recorded my Lepler's locks of the week, which, Charlie, I know you're on a hot streak. My Lepler's locks, 13-2 the last 5 weeks. If only I was benefiting of it, just more than pride. But it's I feel like I've had a pretty good finger on the pulse. So I'd probably give the 1.5, but I don't know if I'd give 3.5. And I think that's the spot where this game lands in for me ultimately.
I'm Charlie, you feel like I'm trying to talk you out of it, like we both are. We have a healthy respect for the wind chill. also shout out to Brett Matsuka on the D line. Thought he's had a very nice year defensively, which I think people don't think of him for. But sure, they generate the third most blocks in the league on a per game basis. So Chicago's offense may not be quite as efficient against the wind chill, but I'm with you ultimately that yeah, I think Chicago should be 3.5 goal favorites, and I expect them to go out there and take care of business. But this Minnesota team is solid, and I might favor them. I might feel a lot better about them if they were like in the West. You know what I mean? Yeah. If they were playing Dallas or San Diego this weekend, I'd give Minnesota maybe the head advantage over them.
Yeah, and the reality is, any single game, anything can happen. These teams are close enough that anything can happen. So we can talk like Chicago's the favorite, and they deserve to be. But we've seen before that crazy things have happened in the playoffs in recent years in the AUDL. I mean, there have been one or two big surprises every year for the last 3 or 4 years, and I think a road team has won an AUDL playoff game every single year since 2016. I think 2015 was the last year that just the home teams won. So, Dallas technically is a road team, even though I consider them a slight favorite. But, and I mean, I know you guys have talked about it as well throughout the summer, but the fact that we're here with, 7 or 8 teams that really feel capable of still winning a championship. I mean, the league is deeper at the top now than it's ever been, which has really made the whole season fascinating in terms of the fun matchups on a regular basis each week. And now we're at the most important games of the year. So again, I'm disappointed I won't be there in person to enjoy them, but I will follow them from afar and hopefully be back next weekend in the Atlantic.
Super, super fun season for sure. I think easily the most engaging AUDL season we've probably ever had. And now we get the playoffs. All right, so we got to make our picks. We're going to pick against the spread, and you can also, pick your winners. We've got, again, the current lines. Dallas plus 1.5, although you have to pay pretty heavy juice if you're actually betting them minus 135. San Diego minus 1.5, and then Chicago minus 2. I'll jump in real quick. I'll make my picks. I think I'm going Dallas money line plus 165. That's probably the best bet in that game, just from a value standpoint. And I'm taking Chicago minus 2 in that matchup up in Chicago. Who you guys got?
I think I'm also on the Dallas money line. I think that's maybe the best bet on the board for the playoffs anyway. And so obviously I think Dallas is going to win and cover. In the Central game, yeah, I think I got to take Chicago minus 2. I just don't think that line is quite wide enough. Even though I think this game is going to look contested for a little while, but I think the Union are probably going to make a run somewhere around like the late second, early third.
That sounds
to push
fair.
This out and cover the spread.
I recorded my Lepler's locks yesterday. That'll be up online Friday. And yeah, I mean, I'm picking against the spread. I took Dallas plus 1.5, which feels like a gift. If it was Dallas pick'em, I probably would have taken Dallas. If it was San Diego, a 1.5 point dog, I probably would have taken San Diego. That's kind of how much I feel like this is going to be a 1 point game. So I'll take the Dallas plus 1.5, but I won't be at all surprised if San Diego wins by 1. And obviously, if they can win by 1, they could win by 2, and the plus 1.5 could be a loser. And as far as the Central Division game goes, I picked it when it was Chicago minus 1.5, so I'm glad to get it at that number. I think I would give 2 as well. And, if Chicago wins by 2, it's a push. But I like the Chicago 1.5, and I'm just fascinated to see how these games are going to unfold. Like there's a lot of mystery. A 12 game season in the return to play year during a pandemic, when all these teams have integrated new pieces, really none more so than Chicago, with all the guys that they added on, both high profile and otherwise. Like this is when you're not tinkering anymore. The pressure is on now to get the job done, and And how are they going to handle that? I mean, that's a real human question in these situations. People can, scoff at the AUDL. It's not as important as club, whatever, but you've been with your team all season long. You have this one game to get, like, I was thinking about this the other day, Charlie, and maybe you'll disagree. Like, we talk about Club Ultimate and the jump from quarters to semis. Going from quarters to semis is a huge deal. I would argue that, yes, maybe a club championship is a bigger deal at this moment in time than a AUDL championship. But I think you can make a pretty good case that making the jump from your division final to championship weekend is a bigger deal than the jump from quarter to semis and club. Because look, you've played your own division all year long. If you get to semis, you get a trip to Washington, D.C., at an MLS stadium against a top team from another division at this big weekend celebration event. Like, there's a huge gap between where these teams are now and where they want to get to 2 weeks from now in Washington, D.C., and how they handle that pressure is what makes sports so great and so fascinating to watch unfold.
I've said for years that AUDL Championship weekend definitely feels like it is as exciting as the semifinals of Club Nationals in the men's division. I don't necessarily think that, every year the level is quite as high. You've got for example, like a sockeye team right now that I think would be like pretty clearly the favorite if they were playing in the AUDL, to win the AUDL championship. So I think there's that involved, but in terms of just like the competition, the experience of going and like being there, for sure. Like I think it's the best event in Ultimate right now. Like when you just like take into consideration all of the things that are going on with the food and the drinks and the experience of being in the stadium and having fans and having high level games. Because once you get to championship weekend, you've really separated the wheat from the chaff at that point. So I don't know. I've never really thought about like getting from quarters to semis at Club Nationals versus getting out of your division and making it to championship weekend. I think there's similarities. I mean, when you look at the teams that are involved and you compare them to their club counterparts, there's a lot of similarities in many cases. You think about what's going on in the Atlantic Division, like you're looking at teams that are not too dissimilar, maybe not New York, but I think the Empire would give the Pony a run for their money if you just cloned people who are on both teams. But you've got Hustle Chain, you've got DC, you got Breeze Truck. I mean, it's not perfect comparisons, but in terms of the quality of the teams, it's similar to the kind of teams you're going to expect to see playing in quarters at nationals and trying to make semis. And so I think it's not an inapt comparison. Anyway, thanks so much, Evan. We appreciate you coming on and looking forward to this weekend. And obviously hope you heal up and test negative soon and you're able to make it out to the Atlantic playoff games next weekend.
Gentlemen, thank you both for having me. Enjoy the show. Pleasure to be on with you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Evan Lepler here with us on Deep Look. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks again to Evan Lepler for stopping by. We got another quasi, I guess, postseason event this weekend. I don't know whether to call it postseason or season or tournament or whatever, but it's exciting. Premier Ultimate League Midwest Division happening this weekend in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Monarchs will be playing the Columbus Pride and the Indy Red in the third of three of these events. We had, of course, East and International 2 weeks ago, and now we get ready for this weekend's Midwest games. And we've got the rosters. We know, I guess we don't know exactly who's going to be playing in the games, but we know who's on the teams. And really looking forward to seeing how these teams match up. This, of course, will be our first time seeing the Milwaukee Monarchs on the field. And, I think, of course, the big question is, who's going to win, which we're going to get to. We'll make our picks. Let's go through these rosters first. Why don't we start with Milwaukee since they're the new team? Keith, this is like a pretty nice mix of Chicago players, Wisconsin players, and other players kind of generally from the Midwest. What stands out to you when you take a look at who's going to be playing for them?
Well, what stands out are two names of two players who've, were their original signings. I think that had everybody really excited. Georgia Shrywise and Austin Pruka. Like, you have the defensive player of the year, I believe, in 2019, Austin Pruka, and then Shrywise has been one of the best women playing Ultimate in the world for like 10 years. So it's hard not to look at that kind of top end talent and kind of get the stars in your eyes right away. But the roster is solid.
Yes.
Like, I think there's good depth here. I expect to see, Jacqueline Jarek having a good weekend, being effective. I'm a fan of Sarah Lipscomb and Kayla Strick as really kind of grinding cutters. Like, I think that there's a lot to like with their roster, and to be honest, I think they're probably my favorite going into the weekend.
I can see why. I can definitely see why. I think they're going to get a run for their money from Columbus. Why don't we take a look at their roster right now? Columbus, probably highlight names are going to be Sadie Jezierski, Emily Barrett, Cara Sieber, like lots of Ohio folks. No surprise there. Sharon Yee, very good. And, also there's depth here, right? And there's a lot of chemistry between these players. I think that's something that could maybe give them an edge against a team like Milwaukee. And I don't know if they're quite as deep as Milwaukee. And I also don't know if they have quite the same top, three. So that's going to be interesting. I do think that like the middle of these teams, right? Like your 5 to 15 range, very balanced. So does the chemistry weigh out in the Pride's favor, or do you see kind of like the high top end and the better depth perhaps of Milwaukee being the thing? I mean, we've been surprised so far in some cases so far this year. I mean, I thought that the Gridlock were going to dominate in the East, and they didn't even make the final. So we'll see. I'm excited to see this team. Kayla Emmerich, Iris Javersack. Like, there's a lot of good players on this Pride team as well.
Now that you mentioned it about New York, we haven't seen the home team win a game yet. The home team, the host team has lost every game, right? Portland lost both their games.
I guess that's right.
To
and to the Torch,
and to Austin, and then New York lost both of their games. So Milwaukee, the spotlight's on you. I was going to say that
there's no way this team loses to Indy. Sorry.
Yeah. There's no way. Anything's possible.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't have said that there's any way DC goes out and just blows out New
I would
York,
never have said that either.
That's what we saw happen. I still think that it's very unlikely that they're going to lose to Indy. But on the one hand, I think that the new teams have shown themselves to be pretty good. Even Portland in their own 2 performance. So like, I'm a little less worried about the new franchise thing because I think all the teams feel very new. Columbus is going to be playing without Paige Soper and Sophie Knowles for the first time. And those are like the players who felt like the core, along with Sadie Jezierski, of the 2019 team. Well, I should say Knowles and Jezierski did. Soper felt like she was going to fill in. So it's like, how does this team look? It feels like a new team. They're going to have Sadie. They're going to have Libby Lehman to kind of like give that solidity for them. They're going to have Emily Barrett. I'll be very, very interested in the Emily Barrett versus hopefully Austin Pruka matchup, but who knows who else? It could be Jarek who's getting some of that. I think seeing how they defend Emily Barrett is going to be a key part of the Milwaukee matchup, which I think we're both saying we feel pretty good is going to be the championship matchup.
I certainly think so. I mean, and it's no disrespect to Indy Red. It's just Indianapolis has not been a hotbed for women's ultimate. I think Red is trying to change that story, but they're going to for sure be the underdog in both of their matchups. There's just not a lot of names that people are going to be familiar with from the club scene. We'll see. I think the big offensive pieces for them: Kate McInerney, Sydney Oland, Kristen Dudley. Maybe, Bree Harrison going to be a piece for them that gets things done. I mean, again, you're just not going to see a lot of names on this roster who are players for club teams of note. And that doesn't mean that they're not good, but it also means that, it's going to be an uphill battle for them.
And losing some real experienced players, I think, hurts them a lot. I think having that group to build around is really important for them. So I think watching how this team develops will be interesting. Seeing what kind of systems and identity they want to build, like that to me is the storyline for them, because I think on just a arms race sense, they're just a bit outclassed. So for them, it'll be about finding who are these players that we can be really excited about. Like, who should we be trying to gear ourselves towards, trying to make the core of this team? Because I don't know that we really know who those players are. Like you mentioned, like McInerney, I think is like going to be a center point of this offense. But I don't know if they have identified really who else is going to be the big time playmakers for them. So I think that's a big part of what they're getting out of this weekend.
Claire Schwab, also a nice player, good cutter. Has played for Steamboat. I think it's going to be fun to see what this team looks like. And just because they don't have, it's obviously a disadvantage. They don't have U.S. national team players on their roster like Columbus and Milwaukee have on theirs. But it's also an opportunity to highlight what this could become. And you never know. You never know.
I think a lot you could like have, not to the same extent, but said some of these things about like Austin going into their weekend.
Sure.
And they performed pretty well. So, you can come from a community where you don't have quite the same like national team representation. Austin hasn't been to nationals in a little while.
Yeah, but Austin's different.
Obviously, it's
Indy.
not the same as Indy. It's totally not. It's not. But I'm saying that there's a chance for you to go out and make a name for yourself. And show that, if people think that you're not about it, that you can go out there and compete with good teams.
By the way, we neglected to talk about the men's division at the Elite Select Challenge, so I'd like to quickly do that. Vault gets the win out there, and going to be curious to see how that team looks in the postseason. I don't think I penciled them through with a bid or anything, but very clearly like the game to go loser team right now, and maybe they're going to do a little better than we think.
Was this a Mallard tournament? Do we have some Mallard?
We got some Mallard action.
I do think I saw Mallard chirping at us while we're stopping in the men's division. I don't know where they were playing, but we definitely got chirped.
Let's see what's going on with Mallard. Mallard was there. They lost to Omen 15-10 in quarters. Lost to Colonels 14-12, and they did beat Raleigh Durham United.
Wait, Mallard was there? Was that Elite Select?
Yeah, they were there.
Well, then who's Mallard 2 was at Cooler Classic?
Oh, how'd they do?
Or is this different weekends?
I have no idea.
Oh, it's okay. Cooler Classic was 2 weekends. These are two different teams, though, because they don't share a score reporter page.
That's why it's ridiculous. Mallard 2 was at the U.S. Open. It makes no sense.
What the heck? Mallard 2 is the one chirping at us.
A B team. They're the C team. They're the D team.
Mallard 2 went out there and won some games, and they're chirping at us about it, I think.
Fair, good for them. Good for them.
I'm trying to see how far they made it at their event. They were won the silver bracket. They finished 9th. So they broke seed. They're finished 12th. So there you go, Mallard 2. Are we going to get Mallard 2 versus Mallard 1? Now that's what I'm in on.
Okay. If that happens, I'm all in with Mallard 2.
Yeah, me too. I'm riding with Mallard 2.
With Mallard 2. All right. Sorry for the digression there. Keith, we got to make our picks for this PUL Midwest weekend. I think we agree that we're going to see Milwaukee and Columbus in the final. So who you taking in that final?
I got to roll with Milwaukee here. I just feel like they're going to be able to put the best player on the field on a lot of occasions, and that can carry a lot of weight. I know we've seen a little bit of the East event wasn't what we expected. The international event was what we expected. So it's unclear. Our team's going to perform to the level we think. Is it just kind of a grab bag? I'm going to go with Milwaukee to go out and represent. They're on home turf. I still think that's an advantage, even if the home teams haven't done that well. So I'll take Milwaukee.
I'm really on the fence. I think there's just enough top end talent to be the difference maker for Milwaukee. Because I think we've seen that in this format, in the PUL, having top players makes a big difference. Like, you're seeing a lot of them out there. I think it's why DC outperformed. DC may not have been as deep as Gridlock, but it didn't matter because they were getting their stars out on the field and their offense was crushing. So I expect to see a similar thing. I think Milwaukee is just going to have some athletic advantages out there. But I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a good game. So I won't be shocked if Columbus wins. But I will take Milwaukee. I think just a little bit more depth, a little bit more top end, and that's probably going to be the difference maker.
Some good semi-pro ultimate to watch.
Looking forward to it. It'll be live streamed on the Premier Ultimate League YouTube channel. Check it out. All right, we got to make our AUDL Week 13 picks, the bonus Atlantic Division. This is going to close it out. I think we've already defeated Stall 7, Keith. I think they cannot win. They're mathematically eliminated.
Love it. Love it.
I think Pavlianis is already thinking about how much he's going to trash them. I can't wait.
Do you have any? Do we need to go and like take some notes? Like send them some ideas?
We should. That's a good plan.
Maybe we just do that as the subscriber bonus. Just trash talking.
Here's the lines for this week. As of earlier today, New York Empire -5.5 on the road in Boston, and the DC Breeze -3 on the road in Tampa Bay. So, Keith, I'm feeling like I got to take Boston here +5.5.
I agree, Charlie. That's exactly what I was going to say.
I just don't think that line makes much sense. Well, I forget what it closed. Didn't it close at 4.5 in New York?
Let me pull that up.
Maybe it was higher. Maybe it was 5. Boston covered. I know that. Maybe it was 6.5. I just think that New York has not really traveled well. They haven't really dominated, just period. 5.5 is pretty widespread. And maybe Boston's going to have Tanner Johnson back this weekend because he's not playing in a tournament. So I just think that this, it's hard to beat a team back to back. I think Boston keeps it close. And honestly, there's no money line up, but it feels like a kind of game that like Boston could snipe New York.
It was 4.5, by the way, and Boston did
4.5.
cover.
Yeah. So Boston 5.5 playing at home. It doesn't make sense.
New York 1-4 versus the spread. So yeah, take note.
Easy money right there. Boston +5.5. Let's do it.
Oh yeah, I'm on it. I'm on Boston 5.5. I don't know what you're talking about with this money line thing though. I don't see.
Okay, fair enough.
Ben Yacht is
But like, what would the number be? It'd be like +350, +400.
Yeah, I mean, if the number's big enough, yeah, you got to take it. But yeah,
all right.
The fact that they don't have one, does that imply like it's like they think it's like New York -2,000 or something stupid?
Yeah, it's just like they don't even want to offer it. Yeah. Tampa +3 playing against DC. Tampa going to have kind of a wacky roster, Keith. I think
this is where there shouldn't be a money line.
DC hammer here for -3 for me.
This is where the money line should not be in play. Because,
this number got to -1.5 earlier this week.
That if you got -1.5, you should feel very, very good.
Crazy number. I mean, it's a weird game because DC has home field advantage no matter what. They got to travel. Maybe weird things happen, but Tampa is like missing a ton of players and are signing random people. So I think that like DC probably wins this game by like 10. And they've dominated these bad teams in the Atlantic. I don't understand this line. I really don't. I think it's an obvious hammer on -3.
Here are potential things I think that could happen that could make this line work out somehow. DC intentionally loses the game, like for matchup reasons. I don't know why they would do that. I feel like that's unlikely, but like, does DK know something we don't? Did Daryl Stanley call him? He's like, yeah, we're done.
We're going to throw it.
We don't want to win.
I mean, Evan did suggest that maybe Raleigh would not be the optimal matchup and that like losing could be to their advantage. I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it either. No one wants to lose the game before the playoffs. Yeah, and if you're thinking like, oh well, DC can phone it in, they can send in their bench. Their bench is good. When they went to when a bunch of their starters went to U.S. Open, like they have like 9 Bergerons, and you saw what Bergerons do. Like they just Bergeron everybody. So their bench is good. So I wouldn't sleep on that front. Here's the other thing: could Tampa Bay just protest? Could they just not play?
I mean,
I feel like they're at odds with the league.
They're definitely mad. I mean, Andrew Roca going on Twitter and really upset about the fact that DC just kind of no-showed the game. DC was feeling weird about some COVID stuff. There were like some COVID scares down in Tampa. Plus, Florida's had just bad COVID in general. And there was the threat of a hurricane causing problems. And so DC just bailed and then essentially asked for a reschedule, which you can understand why Tampa would be pissed off about that. The Tampa followed the rules. The weather didn't end up having a big impact. They would have played the game. Should a team be allowed to just no show? And then the league kind of like sided with DC and said, you know, it's fine, as opposed to calling it a forfeit. And I can see it from both perspectives. I definitely think it's questionable to just decide on your own that you're not going to go to a game.
And Roca's tweets, I think, pretty clearly stated that he feels like the teams that are not the primary market teams, the teams like Tampa and Detroit, like indeed they don't get the benefit of the doubt. So like it feels like they're playing with a different set of rules, and this sort of thing reinforces that feeling for them. So
yeah, if you reverse the roles, like does the league punish Tampa, call it a forfeit? It's plausible, isn't it?
And obviously it had a big impact if Tampa's not going to be able to even field, you know, most of their team. So I get the frustration, and I'm saying I could see Tampa go out there and just like throwing the pull on the ground over and over again. Like,
yeah,
it's not completely impossible to me.
Well, either way, hammer DC -3.
Yeah. Yes.
I think DC is helping pay for this game to happen, because they no-showed. So I think that was like the
how big a line do you need to take Tampa?
Like 7.
Yeah, 7.5, something like that. Yeah.
At that point, I probably just wouldn't bet it. But you know, if it got to 10, maybe I'd take Tampa. I don't know.
I don't know. Like
3 is an insane number. It's really insane.
Yeah, like a mixed Tampa roster is like worse than Detroit, and Detroit gets the 7.5. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to be back with you next week. We'll talk all things PUL, and we're going to be getting ready for the Pro Championships to close out the regular season. There's going to be live streaming coverage, both from Ultiworld and then on ESPN3, semis and finals all covered live, and we'll have early round games as well as quarters and 2 of the semifinals on Ultiworld. It'll also be streamed live on the USA Ultimate YouTube channel. So set your calendars now. Looking forward to that. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.